Back everybody, and today we're going to look a little bit more in depth at editing. What are some of the options that the researcher has when it comes to editing material? Now your textbook will talk about some of the options that you have to plug in and to fill in some blanks if you see that the information is obvious and so forth. So I'm going to discuss some of the pros and cons of that and also talk to you about being just prepared, not only before the interview or the questionnaire administration, but also afterwards and so forth. So let's go ahead and get started with a little bit more in-depth analysis of editing. Okay, let's continue on with Chapter 19 as we continue with editing and coding. Now, yesterday I talked to you just about some fundamentals of the problems that we have with editing and what the editors do. And again, there's in-house editing, which is done by usually the research department. There's also external editing, which you do to use a company, a third-party vendor to do the editing for you. But here's some of the things that an editor will do. Checking for consistency, where the respondents match defined populations. And the book gives you an example of a research that's supposed to be conducted on people who are 20 years old and older, and one of the persons there that responded indicated that he was 18. Well, that can't be in that study because the person is outside the population parameters. So you have to discount that. And then you have checking for consistency within the data collection framework. So whatever the framework may be, that's how you have to operate. For instance, when I did my research for my PhD, I had to indicate the parameters or the framework of my research, and my respondents had to meet certain criteria. They had to have been a professing Christian. They had to have converted to Islam at a certain age, and they had to have been a Muslim for at least a year, and they had to have lived in the rural South, or what I defined as the Bible Belt. So these are very specific parameters that I had to incorporate. Now, did I find people who were outside those parameters? Yes, I talked to several, and then I found out at the very beginning that they were Muslims or converted to Islam at a later age than what I had defined. Now, I didn't want to be rude to them, so I said, well, unfortunately, you are not within the parameters, but I would like to hear your story. So, and every one of them had an interesting story. So even though I wasn't able to use them, I still was able to glean insight to maybe reinforce what my population group was asserting. And I didn't use it in the research, but it was good to be able to get those other types of input. But I had to work within the framework of my population parameters or my research parameters. So make sure that it's all consistent within the framework. Now, taking action when response is obviously in error. Change correct responses only when there are multiple pieces of evidence for doing so. And again, folks, as I said yesterday, unless it is so glaringly obvious that the person made a mistake, I would not touch it because you really can't know what the person really is feeling or means or whatever when they mark something. So, but they say, if you have multiple pieces of evidence, then go ahead and do it. Editing technology. There's computer routines that can check for consistency automatically. And we have, and I guess I'll talk to you about that now, there are all types of computer programs out there and businesses today that, again, will do this for you. just like yesterday, we saw the technology that can pick up on facial expressions, and if they can do that, they can certainly take a look at consistency in your raw data. So this is some of the things that, as you can see, are important when it comes to the editing process. Editing for completeness, an item non-response, the technical term for an unanswered question or an otherwise complete questionnaire resulting in missing data. And then you have plug value, an answer that an editor plugs in to replace blanks or missing values so as to permit data analysis. And the choice of value is based on a predetermined decision rule. And the book gives you, if this happens, you can do this. If that happens, you can do that, and so forth. But one thing you might want to consider, there may be a reason why they didn't answer that question. There may be something going on that they don't want to reveal that may or may not have anything to do with your research. So you plugging something in can mean that you're not representing that person or what they meant. Really, unless it's coming from that individual, you don't know. So plugging in under any circumstance would be risky. Impute is to fill in a missing data point through the use of statistical process, providing an educated guess for the missing response based on available information and probabilities and so forth. This is what they probably meant. Well, you can see from what we have learned so far, data are fact-driven. Data are not speculations. They are not suppositions and what you think or what sounds good or logical or whatever. Data are data. And without the actual person providing data, you're not going to be able to 100% accurately reflect that person's feelings or what they want to have represented. So again, it's always best to go ahead and just call the person, contact them again, go back and figure out a way to be able to get the information that you have missed. And again, when you're doing field editing, that goes a long way. If you're doing a good job of that, that will help curtail and even alleviate a lot of the headaches that come along with what we're doing here and talking about. What about missing data? You have list-wise deletion, and the entire record for a respondent that has left a response missing is excluded from use in statistical analysis. So we're just going to take that whole questionnaire and throw it out. We're not going to use that person. That's the safe measure to take. Pairwise deletion. Only the actual variables for a respondent that do not contain information are eliminated from use in statistical analysis. So only those things that were not used will be thrown out. You'll use the rest. And if you can get away with it and do it and not compromise your data or your research, then there's nothing wrong with it. It's better doing that than to plug in and institute or initiate or implement the things that or introduce the things that you think the person is saying. There are don't know answers. They're legitimate don't know. They just don't have an opinion. And then they're reluctant to give an answer. So they may say don't know and as a refusal to answer. And then there's a confused don't know, does not understand. So again, when you are going through your field editing or when you are interviewing, it's best to identify, what do you mean by don't know? Is it because you don't understand? Is it because you refuse or whatever? If you remember yesterday, there was a question that was asked, how do you feel about a Roth IRA? Well, I don't know. And it doesn't mean that I'm just being mean or don't want to answer it. I may not have an opinion about a Roth IRA. I may not be an investor. So an IRA may not mean much to me. Or I may not understand what a Roth IRA is. So I may be confused by that question. What is an IRA? Now, if you are in the field and you get something like that, then you can explain this is what a Roth IRA is. Some people may have investments that they don't even know they have. 401k, Roth IRA, all these things, CDs. When they go into HR and they fill out the paperwork, some of them may just get into stocks and all that, and just by filling out paperwork and just not really understanding what they're signing up for. So if you want to know an employee's opinion about a Roth IRA or 401k or corporate buy-in or whatever, then if they don't know, it may not be because they don't care. It may be because they really don't know what you're talking about. So it would help to explain that. The pitfalls of editing, allowing subjectivity to enter into the editing process. You should be intelligent enough and experienced and objective enough to not try to integrate your feelings and thoughts, and that's why it's very hard to justify plugging in responses, because you're answering based on what you think should or shouldn't be. But it's a systematic process for assessing the questionnaire, or a systematic procedure for assessing the questionnaire should be developed by the research analyst so that the editor has clearly defined decision rules. In no circumstance should you plug in anything, or if you read this and how long have you lived here, 30, and don't assume that it's years, but the next question, how old are you, 28, then maybe you can put down 30 months. But then again, you also have a 30-day period that a person could have done it. Now, normally a person would say either 1 month or 3.5 years instead of saying 30 months. But, or not 3.5 years, but you know what I mean, 12, 24, 2.5 years, somewhere around there. Speculating is very dangerous, and that's, I'm beating this horse to death, but I just can't emphasize it enough, especially when they're telling you here that you have options. Just be very careful. Pre-testing edit. Editing during the pre-test stage can prove very valuable for improving questionnaire format, identifying poor instructions or inappropriate question wording. So, and that's just making sure that your test has integrity. There's what we call validity in measuring, and validity means that the measurement tool measures what it's supposed to measure. So if your questions are not driving home to the issue, if it's not asking or getting to the research question, then your tool is invalid. So you need to be able to proof all of that from the very beginning to make sure that everything is above board, and that what you're asking on the questionnaire is a reflection of what the research firm is wanting to find out. Now, coding is a process of assigning a numerical score or other character symbol to previously edited data. Codes are rules for interpreting, classifying, and recording data in the coding process, and the actual numerical or other character symbols assigned to raw data. And then you have dummy coding. It's a numeric 1 or 0 coding where each number represents an alternative response, such as male would be 0 and female would be 1. If K is the number of categories for a qualitative variable, K1 dummy variables are needed. So you do have categories for different realms or themes. So, and that's what you're looking at really when you're looking at qualitative responses. You're trying to find themes. That's the ultimate goal. What is the theme of what we're seeing here? Now, you see here in the next slide, let me show it to you, them coding for red or white wine. Now, if you notice here, you have red wine. Color is blue or red. Oak barrel vanilla. The taste is of an oak barrel. Red wine 2 and red wine 1. That's what we're talking about there with multiple variables. The color is slightly red, maybe browns. Smell is fruity and so forth. The white wine, it's easy to drink, quite sweet, strong smell, tastes good. These are the responses that people have given when it comes to the white or the red wine. And you see here that there is a map where everything is mapped out. Very romantic feeling. Appearance is the cause of romantic feeling. I have no idea what they're talking about on that. But anyway, you're making connections. You're connecting responses to an overall theme about whatever it is that you're wanting to study. In this case, it's white wine versus red wine. Now, what they're showing you here is it looks like a software program that will do all this stuff for you. All you have to do is you can scan them in or you can type them in, and the computer will take all of these words, all of these responses, smells sweet, tastes good, this, that, and the other, and it will code or it will assign it different areas or themes. Now, I don't like them because they are not a computer software program is not there when you talk to the person. And again, I did interviews, so this is from an interview standpoint. But if you take a look at coding software, just go online and take a look at coding software. It will show you the way that it codes information or data. And I bought one. Well, I didn't buy it. I went under the trial when I first started my research for my PhD, and I tried it out, and it was a mess. There were words all over the place. And really all it does is just identify similarities, similar words. And it doesn't take into consideration the context in which those words were said. And that's where you need maybe the emotional part of it. And as you saw that other software, to pick up on emotional cues, because there were some words that just didn't fit within a certain theme. So we had to, I had to do it by hand. Now, there's another option, and that's a third-party vendor. There are a lot of them, and believe me, I was contacted by many of them when I first started looking into using a third party. I didn't do that for two reasons. Well, there were several, I guess 3 reasons. The first one, they were very expensive. I mean, they were wanting $4,000 or $5,000 to code all of the transcripts that I had, and I had about eight or 9 transcripts that I wanted to code, and they would have done it for me. But secondly, I wanted to do the research myself. I wanted to know what it was like. I didn't want to just pay someone to do it for me. So it was there that I decided I wanted to do this on my own. And then thirdly, you never know with a company if they're really getting to the essence of what that person was feeling. And again, that's because they're not there like a computer. They're indifferent. Sometimes that's good, but sometimes it's not good. When you're wanting to pick up on nuances and emotions and things like that, you want to make sure that you're accurately reflecting not only the words but the context in which those words were given. So those were the reasons why I didn't use it. When you're doing business research, really, whoever does it, however method you use, you'll be able to tell the differences, and you'll be able, working with the people who are hiring you, what they will allow and what's going to be acceptable. I can tell you that when you code responses, when you code data, it is very time consuming and methodical. At Mid-America, we have on the wall whiteboards, and I have covered up whiteboards just with the different responses and words and so forth. So just know that either way, the goal for you to code is to be able to put into some type of collective framework similar responses so that you can develop themes. And that's the whole purpose of it, whether you're doing it by yourself, whether you're doing it with a research group, or whether you're doing it through technology. This is the goal of coding, and to be able to do it ethically. Well, everyone, I hope after today you'll know the pros and cons of trying to edit information, your data that you're going to eventually transcribe and store to be used for analysis. So be very careful, as I've mentioned in my lecture, with plugging in information. Again, you do have, or you may have, that option. That depends on the research firm and the company that's hiring you, or your company that's using you to do the research. Just make sure you have those parameters clearly defined by the one who is contracting you before you go out and do anything on your own. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble, and you can also damage your reputation and future opportunities in the field of research. Well, that's all we have for today. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow.